Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most clearly? Your worth dismissed by those whose approval you once craved? Picture toiling in silence, building something extraordinary, only to have your family label you a failure until the moment you unveil a truth so staggering it redefines everything. That's my story. A tale of quiet triumphs and a revelation that shattered decades of misunderstanding. I'm Camilla Johnson, and I want to take you back to where it all began. To a childhood overshadowed by a family legacy I was never meant to claim. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from. And if this story resonates, hit that subscribe button. There's more to come. I'm 35 now, living in Chicago, where the skyline glitters with possibility and the hum of ambition fuels my days. But growing up in the North Shore suburbs, in a sprawling 5,000-square-foot house that felt more like a museum than a home, I was the outlier in the Johnson family portrait. My father, Richard Johnson, was the architect of Johnson Industries, an electrical components manufacturer he built from a single warehouse in 1990 into a mid-sized empire by the time I was born. To him, the company wasn't just a business. It was his identity, his true child. Every dinner conversation revolved around production quotas or supplier contracts, and every holiday was a stage for potential investors. My mother, Eleanor, played her role with grace, the impeccable homemaker who kept our lives polished while Dad poured his soul into the factory floor. Then there was my brother, David, 4 years my senior at 39, the golden heir groomed from childhood to inherit Dad's throne. From age 15, he shadowed Dad at the plant, absorbing the rhythm of machines and the weight of expectation. I, on the other hand, was the question mark. The daughter who didn't fit the mold. While Dad and David revered the tangible circuit boards, assembly lines, I was captivated by the invisible currents of finance, the systems that powered industries. Where they saw components, I saw capital flows and market inefficiencies. I didn't want to build things. I wanted to orchestrate the forces that made building possible. But to Dad, finance was a necessary evil, a game of paper pushing unfit for a Johnson. When I announced my plan to study finance at Northwestern, his sigh was heavy with disappointment, as if I'd chosen a path of frivolity over legacy. That moment planted a seed of resolve in me, a quiet vow to prove my worth, even if he couldn't see it. The Chicago skyline became my refuge, a constellation of glass and steel that mirrored the ambition I'd nurtured since leaving home at 18. I threw myself into my studies at Northwestern, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in finance. My name etched in gold on the dean's list. That achievement, like so many others, went unnoticed by my family, but it opened doors to Meridian Partners, a boutique investment firm specializing in industrial turnarounds. There, I carved a reputation as a strategist who could spot value in crumbling companies, orchestrating deals that saved jobs and restored balance sheets. By 30, I was managing portfolios worth tens of millions of dollars. My office on the 35th floor of a downtown tower offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan's restless waves. Yet, no matter how high I climbed, the weight of my family's indifference pressed against me, a silent reminder of the gap between who I was and who they wanted me to be. Family gatherings at our North Shore home were a ritual of exclusion. I'd arrive at the 5,000-square-foot colonial, clutching a bottle of Cabernet as armor, only to watch Dad introduce David as my son, the future of Johnson Industries, his voice swelling with pride. I was Camilla, my daughter. The words flat, as if my existence needed no elaboration. I stopped sharing my successes, promotions, deals closed. Industry awards because they dissolved in the face of Dad's disinterest. Once, at a Christmas party doubling as a networking event, I overheard him tell a colleague, "Women in banking. They'll chew her up in 5 years." I was 28, already outlasting his prediction, but the sting of his words lingered. David, too, played his part, his fraternal affection laced with condescension. "How's life moving papers around?" He'd tease, clapping my shoulder as if I were a child playing at business. I'd force a smile, swallow my retort, and sip my wine. My 200-square-foot downtown apartment calling me back to a world where I was seen. By 2018, the financial crisis rippled through manufacturing, and whispers reached me not from family, but from industry contacts that Johnson Industries was in peril. The company, sprawled across a 200 square foot facility, had overextended itself with a $10 million expansion, banking on orders that never materialized. By early 2019, it teetered on bankruptcy, its cash reserves drained, banks refusing loans, and assets poised for a fire sale. I learned this not from Dad, who'd rather face ruin than admit vulnerability, nor from David, whose pride mirrored our father's. They never called, never sought my expertise. Though saving distressed companies was my daily work, the realization cut deep. Dad would scour every bank in Chicago before asking his daughter for help. His dismissal of my career so absolute, it blinded him to the lifeline I could offer. Sitting in my apartment, the city's lights sprawling beyond my balcony, I grappled with a choice. I could let Johnson Industries collapse, proving Dad's failure, or I could act, not for his approval, but for the legacy I couldn't entirely abandon. The decision crystallized in the quiet of that night, setting a course that would redefine our family's story. I didn't know then how it would unfold, but I knew it began with me stepping into the shadows, wielding the expertise they'd never valued. The decision to save Johnson Industries ignited a quiet fire within me, not born of vengeance, but of a duty I couldn't shake. As if the factory's humming machines still echoed in my bones. In the spring of 2019, I stood before Meridian Partners Investment Committee, my voice steady as I pitched the acquisition of a distressed but salvageable manufacturer. I laid bare my connection to the company, recusing myself from the final vote to ensure impartiality. Yet my argument was relentless. Johnson Industries, with its 200 square foot facility and loyal client base, was undervalued, its potential obscured by mismanaged debt. The committee approved a $15 million infusion, a lifeline disguised as a business deal, and tasked me with overseeing the turnaround. To shield my involvement from my family's pride, I enlisted Alex Chen, my colleague and confidant, as the intermediary, his name the only one they'd know. By June, Dad signed the papers, believing Alex represented faceless investors, never suspecting I held 51% of his life's work. From my 35th floor office, I became the shadow architect of the company's revival, restructuring $8 million in debt, streamlining supplier contracts, and approving upgrades to outdated equipment. Each decision was a delicate balance, preserving the factory's core while fortifying its financial spine. Alex relayed my directives, his calm precision a buffer against Dad's grumbling about spreadsheet-obsessed outsiders. At family gatherings, I sat through their complaints, nodding sympathetically as David lamented investor meddling, my silence a shield for the truth. The irony was sharp. Every modernization they praised, every contract they secured, bore my invisible signature. Over 2 years, the company stabilized, its cash reserves climbing to $5 million, orders flowing again. Yet, the weight of my secret grew heavier with each visit home, where Dad's dismissive nods and David's patronizing smirks reminded me why I'd chosen deception. I hadn't planned to reveal my role, content to let the factory thrive under their illusion of control. But secrets, like fault lines, have a way of cracking under pressure. And mine was about to rupture in the most unexpected setting, a holiday table laden with cranberry sauce and unspoken grudges. Thanksgiving 2024 arrived with a chill that mirrored the tension I carried into my parents' North Shore home. Its 5,000 square foot elegance, a stage for familiar rituals. I clutched a bottle of Pinot Noir, my emotional armor, as Mom's too tight hug and David's condescending, "How's the paper chase?" Mila set the tone. The dining room, aglow with crystal and silver, hummed with Mom's military precision traditions, turkey carved by Dad, wine poured by David, and me, sipping silently, braced for exclusion. Conversation followed its predictable script, David and Dad dissecting production tweaks, Mom and Caroline chatting about charity galas until Dad cleared his throat over pumpkin pie. His fork set down with deliberate weight. He announced Johnson Industries' turnaround, crediting David's exemplary leadership and unveiling a $20 million buyback plan to reclaim control from the investors. The proposal was reckless, the company's $5 million reserves too thin to shoulder such debt. And I couldn't stay silent. "Is that financially sound?" I asked, my tone neutral but pointed. Dad's eyes narrowed, his voice icy. Not everything's about numbers. Camilla, pride matters more than your balance sheets. David piled on, sneering. Some of us build things, not just analyze them. The dismissal, so casual, so complete, snapped something inside me. Years of swallowed retorts surged forward, and I spoke. My voice low but unyielding. The company was 3 months from collapse 2 years ago. Why do you think it recovered? Dad scoffed. We adapted. Through grit you'd never understand. Shuffling papers downtown. The room stilled. Mom's eyes wide. Caroline's napkins suddenly fascinating. I leaned forward. Each word a blade. I saved Johnson Industries. I'm the investor who bought 51% in 2019. I restructured your debt, approved your upgrades, and made every major decision since. Silence swallowed the table. I pulled a folded document from my purse, sliding it across the mahogany. My signature's at the bottom. Your buyback, it needs my approval. And it's not happening. Dad's face drained of color. David's jaw hung slack. And I stood, purse in hand, walking out into the November night. The weight of truth both liberating and crushing. In my 1-tier, 200-square-foot apartment, the Chicago skyline a silent witness. My phone buzzed with Mom's texts and David's voicemails, but nothing from Dad. I silenced them, pouring a scotch as Alex called. Your father's livid, he said, his voice steady. He's consulting attorneys. Claims we conspired. I sighed, ice clinking in my glass. Are we exposed, Alex? Ever the lawyer turned strategist? Was firm. The acquisition's airtight. You disclosed your connection, recused yourself, and followed every protocol. It's just messy now. Messy was an understatement. The next morning, at Meridian's 35th floor office, Lake Michigan, steel gray beyond the windows, I faced Dad, David, and their attorney, James Whitman, Meredith Zhao, our legal counsel, flanked Alex and me. Her presence a quiet force. Dad's voice was controlled but venomous. You hid this. Let us negotiate with our daughter like fools. I met his gaze. I disclosed everything to the committee. Would you have accepted my help if I'd offered it openly? From the daughter who shuffles papers, David interjected. You lied to us, running the company like a puppet master. I turned to him. Would you have followed my lead if you knew, be honest? His silence was answer enough. Meredith confirmed the deal's legality, but Dad demanded a buyback. I shook my head. The company can't afford $20 million in debt. It's recovering, not invincible. I slid a proposal across the table, a 3-year plan for gradual family ownership, tied to financial benchmarks. Review it. I said, standing, but I won't let pride tank what I've rebuilt. Dad's eyes held a flicker of uncertainty, a crack in his armor. As they left, the weight of our fractured legacy hanging heavy in the air, the November air lingered, sharp and unforgiving, as I wrestled with the wreckage of my Thanksgiving confession. Weeks later, a small package arrived at my downtown office, its elegant wrapping betraying no hint of sender. Inside, a silver frame held a photograph from a distant summer me, a wide-eyed girl on Johnson Industries' factory floor, peering at a circuit board as Dad explained its secrets. A note, scrawled on company letterhead, accompanied it. I lost sight of the daughter who asked fearless questions. I'd like to start again. Christmas Eve, 7 p. Ma. Just family. The words, raw and unadorned, pierced the armor I'd built, stirring a cautious hope. I arrived at the North Shore house under a blanket of fresh snow, the 12-foot Christmas tree casting a warm glow. Mom's embrace held a new weight, her voice trembling. I failed you. Camilla, staying silent while they diminished you. Her apology. Unexpected. Cracked open a door long sealed. Dinner unfolded with strained civility. The clink of crystal masking deeper currents. David's gaze was guarded. Caroline's measured. But it was Dad who shifted the night's trajectory. I was wrong, he said, his voice rough with effort. To box you into my vision of legacy. The admission hung heavy. A bridge across decades of dismissal. David bristled, his resentment spilling out. You played us. Camilla, pulling strings like a shadow CEO. Caroline, her therapist's insight cutting through. urged honesty. You're all guarding old wounds, hurting each other to protect them. The table became a confessional. David venting the pressure of being the heir. Me unearthing the pain of erasure. Dad proposed a radical shift. Join us as CFO. Camilla, your financial mind. David's operational grit. My experience were stronger together. The offer was a siren call, promising integration but threatening the independence I'd carved at Meridian. I hesitated. The Chicago skyline's distant pulse, a reminder of my hard-won autonomy. By January 2025, I stepped into Johnson Industries' $200, 600 square foot facility as CFO, my nameplate gleaming on a sleek office door. The all-hands meeting buzzed with curiosity. Dad's voice carrying a pride I'd never heard as he introduced me. David stood stiffly, his acceptance grudging but present. In our first executive session, I scrutinized an $8 million acquisition, spotting inflated projections that others missed. We need deeper due diligence, I insisted, my tone firm but collaborative. David's jaw tightened, then relaxed. Reasonable. I'll delay talks. The moment, small but seismic, marked a new equilibrium over whiskey in Dad's office. He reflected. David's adjusting, but it's hard. Sharing a future he thought was his alone. I nodded, catching myself softening opinions to avoid old frictions, yet sensing progress. The factory's hum, once a symbol of exclusion, now felt like a pulse I could shape. A legacy no longer at odds with my truth. Spring 2025 bloomed, softening Chicago's edges, and Johnson Industries flourished under our reshaped leadership. A Sunday dinner at the North Shore house carried a different air. Mom pulling me into her kitchen, her domain once sacrosanct. Help with the sauce, she said, handing me an apron. Her smile a quiet invitation to a bond beyond formality. As I stirred, her stories of burnt dinners and early struggles wove a thread of intimacy I hadn't known I craved. Later, Dad led me to his study, unlocking a drawer to reveal a worn folder. Inside, clippings and awards chronicled my journey, from high school victories to finance monthly profiles. Kept in secret, I was proud, he admitted, but feared you'd outgrow us. He handed me a new company charter, our signatures mine, his, David's cementing equal partnership. This is your legacy. 2, he said. The words a balm to old wounds. David raised a whiskey glass at dinner's end, his toast measured but sincere. To Johnson Industries and family, flaws and all, our glasses clinked. A fragile harmony. The company secured a $12 million contract, my financial restructuring enabling expansions that David's efficiencies made feasible back in my 200 square foot apartment. The skyline a glittering testament to my choices. I spread the folder's contents across my table. Each clipping was a piece of me, daughter, sister, executive no longer fractured. The factory's 200 square foot sprawl, once a cage, now stood as a canvas for integration, where my expertise and family's grit intertwined. Tensions lingered, moments when old patterns surfaced. But we caught them, recalibrating with hard-won awareness. This wasn't perfection, but a beginning, authentic and whole. As I traced the folder's edges, I knew the work of weaving past and future continued. A legacy not just preserved, but reimagined. Stay tuned for more stories like this. And if this moved you, hit subscribe, you won't want to miss what's next. In the quiet of my downtown Chicago apartment, with the skyline's glow casting shadows across my dining table, I traced the edges of the folder Dad gave me. Its clippings a map of a journey I hadn't fully understood until now. My story taught me that true strength lies not in proving others wrong, but in building something enduring despite their doubt. I spent years chasing validation, believing my family's dismissal defined my worth, only to learn that their blindness was their own, not a measure of my value. Saving Johnson Industries, revealing my role, and stepping into its leadership wasn't about triumph over Dad or David. It was about honoring the part of me that still believed in our shared legacy. Even when they couldn't see it, I learned to hold my ground, not with anger, but with clarity, letting my work speak where words failed. The 200 square foot factory, once a symbol of exclusion, became a canvas for integration. where my financial acumen and their operational grit could coexist. Yet, the deeper lesson was in the fragility of reconciliation. Family wounds don't heal overnight, but they mend through persistent, honest effort. I discovered that legacy isn't a static inheritance, but a living process, reshaped by every choice to listen, to forgive, to evolve. As I look out at the city, its pulse a reminder of the life I've built. I realize my greatest achievement wasn't owning the company, but claiming my place in it, whole and unapologetic, trusting that authenticity, not approval, is the foundation of any lasting triumph. My name is Kelly Morgan, and I spent 7 years building an empire that wasn't mine on paper, only to watch my parents hand it to someone who couldn't tell a blueprint from a grocery list. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I was 29 when I walked into Morgan & Company Design Build, armed with an architecture degree and a business minor that my parents thought was nice but unnecessary. The family construction business was surviving, barely. My father, George, still used paper ledgers. My mother, Ellen, chased payments with apologetic phone calls and charm that only worked half the time. "We built this from nothing," Dad would say proudly, gesturing at the cluttered office that smelled like sawdust and coffee gone cold. And they had 2 decades of kitchen remodels and deck installations built on blistered hands and missed dinners. But I saw potential they couldn't. Within 6 months, I digitized everything. Contracts went from handshakes to ironclad documents. I built relationships with commercial developers they'd only read about in trade magazines. By year 2, our revenue had tripled. By year 4, we had a staff of 23. I worked 80-hour weeks. I learned construction law at midnight, negotiated with suppliers at dawn, and spent weekends at client sites ensuring every detail matched our reputation. The business became my identity, my purpose, my proof that I was worth something beyond being George Morgan's daughter. Then there was Landon. My younger brother spent his 20s finding himself, which apparently required failing at 2 tech startups, meditating in Thailand for 14 months, and coming home with a man bun and ideas about disrupting the construction paradigm. I didn't resent him. Not at first. "He's creative," Mom would say defensively when Landon missed another project deadline. "He connects with people," Dad would add when I stayed late fixing another client relationship Landon had damaged with his casual approach to professionalism. I told myself it was fine. We were family. Different strengths, same team. Until that Friday afternoon when I found the envelope on my chair. The letterhead was official. The language was cold. Landon Morgan appointed Chief Executive Officer of Morgan & Company, effective immediately. No discussion, no warning, no conversation. My name appeared nowhere in the document. I sat in that back office for 20 minutes, staring at words that rearranged my entire existence. The building hummed around me, phones ringing, contractors laughing in the hallway, the coffee maker gurgling in the break room. Everything continued as if the ground hadn't just opened beneath my feet. I didn't cry. Crying would have meant I was surprised, and some part of me had always known this moment might come. In families like mine, loyalty is currency, but only for some people. For others, it's simply expected. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I went home and opened my laptop with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The company's shared drive glowed on my screen. 5 years of systems I'd built, processes I'd documented, shortcuts only I understood. Vendor contacts with notes like, "Call Lisa directly, avoids markup." Client preference files. Henderson likes site visits at 7 a.m., brings his own coffee. Budget templates that had saved us thousands in tracking errors. My institutional knowledge distilled into folders. I backed up my personal files. Then I deleted my contribution from the shared drive. Not the company's documents. Those belonged to Morgan & Company. But my frameworks, my guides, my shortcuts, those belonged to me. What remained was theirs to figure out. Or not. Monday morning, I didn't show up. My phone stayed silent, face down on the kitchen counter while I took the longest shower of my life, then sat on my balcony watching the city wake up without me. It felt like stepping off a treadmill I'd been running on for 7 years. The first call came Tuesday afternoon. Dad's voice on the voicemail was tight, controlled. "Kelly, we need to discuss your absence." This is unprofessional. Unprofessional. The word was a slap. Wednesday. 3 missed calls. Thursday. Silence. Friday. A text message that made my chest tighten. Hawthorne Properties is pulling out. They want you on the project. Call me. Hawthorne was our entry into luxury commercial builds, a $5 million contract that would have transformed everything. I'd spent 8 months building that relationship, understanding their vision, earning their trust. I texted back one sentence. Ask your CEO. Isn't that what he's for? The response came an hour later. This isn't a game, Kelly. But it wasn't a game to me either. It was my life, my work, my worth, all of it dismissed with a title handed to someone who'd never earned it. Saturday morning, Mom called. Her voice had that syrupy quality she used when smoothing over conflict. Sweetheart, you've made your point. Let's have dinner Sunday. Just family. We need to talk about this like adults. Like adults. As if I was a child throwing a tantrum rather than a professional responding to betrayal. But I agreed. I needed to see their faces, to understand if they even grasped what they'd done. Sunday arrived cold and gray. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 6 p.m., watching the warm light spill from the windows. Inside, I could hear laughter. Dad's booming voice, glasses clinking. They were celebrating something. Landon opened the door, his expression carefully neutral. Hey, Kel. I walked past him without responding. The dining room smelled like Mom's pot roast, the table set with the good china they reserved for important occasions. Dad sat at the head, flipping through a leather notebook. Mom bustled in the kitchen, her apron printed with sunflowers. It looked like every family dinner we'd ever had, except everything that had changed. Let's eat first, Mom suggested brightly, setting down a platter. Then we can discuss everything calmly. But I was done with calm. Why? I asked, the word dropping into the room like a stone into still water. Dad looked up from his notebook. Why what? Why did you make Landon CEO behind my back? After everything I've done, everything I've built, why? The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom busied herself pouring wine, her hands trembling slightly. Dad leaned back in his chair with that expression I'd seen him use with difficult contractors. Patient but immovable. Kelly, no one questions your contribution, he began carefully. You've been the operational backbone of this company, but Landon brings something different. Vision, fresh perspective. He connects with the younger team, understands modern branding. He doesn't understand contracts, I interrupted. He can't read a P&L statement. Last month, he promised a client custom finishes we can't source domestically, adding 3 weeks and $40,000 to the timeline. I fixed it, like I fix everything. He's learning, Mom interjected softly. At what cost? My voice rose despite my intention to stay controlled. You gave him my company. It's not your company, Dad said sharply. It's our family's company. And frankly, Kelly, you were burning out. Working until midnight, skipping vacations, losing perspective. We thought giving you space, letting you step back. You didn't give me space, you replaced me. The words came out harder than I intended. Without discussion, without warning, you wrote me out of my own story. Landon finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. I didn't ask for this, Kel. Dad came to me and said you needed a break, that I could help shoulder the burden, and you said yes. I turned to him. You took the title, the authority, the office, my office, and didn't think to ask why your sister, the one who's been running this company, was suddenly taking a break she didn't know about? He looked down at his plate. I thought I could handle it. You thought wrong. I pulled out my phone and opened an email, sliding it across the table to Dad. Hawthorne signed with Brenner Group yesterday. $2.3 million contract. Gone. Dad's face went pale. They'll come back. Once things settle, they won't. I built that relationship over 8 months. They trusted me, not Morgan and Company. Without me, we're just another mid-tier contractor. I stood, reaching for my coat. And now Landon gets to learn that leadership isn't about vision. It's about the thousand small decisions that no one sees, the relationships you build at 6 a.m. site meetings, the credibility you earn by being excellent when it's inconvenient. What do you want? Dad's voice had an edge of desperation. You want to see us fail? You want the business your mother and I built from nothing to collapse? I want respect, I said quietly. I want to be valued, and clearly that's not possible with your golden boy playing CEO while I work in the shadows. Mom reached for my hand. Sweetheart, please. I pulled back. I spent 7 years proving my worth. I won't spend another 7 begging you to see it. The walk to my car felt longer than it should have. Behind me, the house glowed warm and inviting, full of people who loved me but couldn't value me. And I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. Love without respect is just a pretty cage. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights blur and sharpen. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't read. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't managing a crisis, wasn't solving a problem, wasn't carrying weight that wasn't mine to bear. I was just existing, and it felt like breathing after being underwater. The silence lasted 3 days. Then the storm hit. Thursday morning, my phone erupted. 6 missed calls before I'd finished my coffee. Messages from project managers, accountants, even the receptionist, all asking variations of the same question. Where did you put the files? Clint Reynolds, our senior PM, left a voicemail that sounded like barely controlled panic. Kelly, the Baxter Hills specs? Landon says they're gone? The client needs confirmation by 4 p.m. and no one can find the original documentation. Please, if you have copies... I deleted the message. An hour later, Karen from accounting. The budget tracking system isn't syncing with the new project estimates. Landon told me to call you because, quote, Kelly built that thing, she'll know how to fix it. This is urgent. By afternoon, the trickle had become a flood. LinkedIn messages from former colleagues. Emails marked urgent. Even a text from our office manager. Kelly, I don't know what happened, but everyone's asking for you. Are you coming back? I turned off my phone and went for a walk. The park near my apartment was quiet. Kids on swings, dogs chasing frisbees, an old man feeding pigeons from a paper bag. Life continued, indifferent to my crisis. The world didn't stop because my family had imploded. And I realized I didn't want to be the person who made their problems my emergency anymore. When I got home, a new message waited. Dad. Call me, it's urgent. I stared at the words, then typed, what's wrong? The response was immediate. Wexler account, 2.3, they're walking. Said they don't trust Landon's leadership. Kelly, please, we need you. I set the phone down and poured another glass of wine. They needed me, finally. But need isn't the same as value. Over the next week, I watched from a distance as Morgan & Company bled. A third client put their project on hold, pending leadership clarification. 2 senior employees gave notice. Industry contacts started reaching out to me directly, carefully fishing for information about what's happening at Morgan's. I had coffee with Sienna Jacobs, an executive recruiter I'd worked with years ago. She scanned my resume with widening eyes. You're a unicorn, she said bluntly. Technical expertise, leadership experience, proven growth results. Do you know how rare that combination is? Firms would kill to bring you in. My family didn't seem to think so. Sienna's smile was sad. That's the curse of being indispensable to people who think they already know you. Familiarity breeds blindness. The phrase stuck with me. Familiarity breeds blindness. That evening, my mother appeared at my door holding Tupperware. Her famous baked ziti, like carbs could solve betrayal. Hi, sweetheart. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. Your father's struggling. Landon's in over his head. We didn't realize how much you did until you weren't there to do it. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I asked, not moving aside to let her in. No, it's just the truth. She hesitated. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I'm asking, please come back. Help us fix this. Fix what exactly? The company, or the fact that you only value me when I'm useful? She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I finally stepped aside, letting her into my apartment. You gave Landon everything I earned because you thought he needed a win. You sacrificed my career to fix his ego. And now that it's failing, suddenly I'm important again. Mom set the Tupperware on my counter with shaking hands. What would make it right? Tell me and I'll make it happen. For the first time, I said the thing I'd barely let myself think. Control, equity, real power, not the illusion of it, and Landon out of the leadership seat. Her eyes widened. You want to be CEO? No, I said firmly. I want ownership, decision-making authority, a seat at the table that no one can take away, 35% equity, and co-executive structure. That would destroy your father. No, his decision is what's destroying him. I'm offering him a way out. She left without the Tupperware. The next morning, I called Jasmine Patel, a lawyer friend from college. I need you to review something. Company bylaws, ownership structure, CEO appointment resolution. Can you tell me where the leverage points are? Going to war with your family? She asked carefully. No, going to negotiate on equal footing for the first time in my life. While Jasmine worked, an email appeared in my inbox. Westmore Capital Group. They were looking for a director of strategic operations. 6 figures, signing bonus, relocation assistance, full autonomy. The job description could have been written for me. I didn't say yes, but I didn't delete it either. That afternoon, Dad sent a message. Let's meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverstone Club, just to talk. No assumptions. I showed up 5 minutes early, wearing a new navy suit. Not the one I used to wear to Morgan & Company meetings. This one was sharper, more expensive. A statement. The restaurant was elegant and quiet, the kind of place you choose when trying to look composed while everything crumbles. My parents sat at a corner table, Dad rigid, Mom anxious. Landon was there too, which surprised me. Kelly, Dad said with a nod. No hug, no warmth, just business. Good. I preferred it that way. Let's get to it, I said, sitting down. Dad cleared his throat. First, I want to acknowledge that we underestimated your contribution. I thought I was making a decision for the company's long-term health, but I ignored the fact that you were the company's health. I waited. I also assumed you'd never leave, that you'd always be there, pushing through, keeping things running. His voice dropped. I took advantage of that. For that, I apologize. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I'd expected. Mom jumped in. We've been discussing options, ways to make this right. But we want to hear from you first. What do you need? I looked at all 3 of them, letting silence stretch. Then I slid a typed document across the table. 35% ownership, executive voting rights, co-CEO structure. Landon handles vision and client-facing work. I handle operations and strategic execution. All major decisions require both signatures. Dad's eyes narrowed. That's significant control. It's what I'm worth. This would give you equal power to protect what I built? Yes, exactly. I leaned forward. Right now, clients don't trust this company because leadership is unstable. You bring me back with clarity and authority, and you don't just stop the bleeding. You rebuild credibility. And if we say no? Mom asked quietly. I walk. Permanently. Westmore Capital has already made an offer, and they're happy to let me bring relationships with me, including Anderson and Wexler. Dad's face went pale. You'd really do that? I'd rather build something from scratch than continue propping up something that devalues me. The silence was heavy. Then Landon spoke. What if I step down as CEO? Everyone turned to him. He shrugged, but his eyes were serious. Let's be honest. I'm drowning. I thought I could handle it, but I've been faking it since day one. The pressure, the decisions, it's not what I thought it would be. His voice cracked slightly. I don't want to be the reason we lose everything. It was the most mature thing I'd ever heard my brother say. Dad looked down at my document again, then back at me. I'll have our attorney draft an agreement. You want it signed before you return? before I step foot in that building, I confirmed. And your title? Chief Operating Officer, I replied. But functionally, I'm calling the shots alongside Landon. Equal partners. Dad extended his hand across the table. We shook. Not as father and daughter, but as business partners negotiating a deal. One more thing, I added. This agreement is binding. You can't undo it because you get uncomfortable with me having power. If you sign this, you're committing to seeing me as an equal. Understood, Dad said quietly. 10 days later, the papers were signed. 35% equity, co-executive control, legally protected decision-making authority. I didn't return to Morgan & Company as someone who needed a job. I returned as someone who'd proven her worth by walking away and had the courage to set terms for her return. Monday morning, I walked back into Morgan & Company wearing the same navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio, and feeling like I was entering a building I'd built with my bare hands. The staff's reaction was cautious. Rumors had flown during my absence. I'd been fired. I'd quit. I'd started a competing firm. The truth was stranger than any gossip. I called an all-hands meeting at 9 a.m. I'm not here to relitigate the past, I told the assembled team. What happened happened, but I am here to rebuild what we lost and take us somewhere better. If you're with me, let's get to work. Clint, our senior project manager, stood up. We missed you, Kelly. The room exhaled collectively. So did I. Landon and I fell into an unexpected rhythm. He focused on branding, client relations, and creative vision, things he actually enjoyed and excelled at. I handled operations, contracts, and strategic growth. We weren't best friends, but we were finally aligned. 3 weeks after my return, I stayed late working on a client onboarding strategy. At 7:45, the lights clicked off one by one as staff left for the evening. I stood by the window overlooking the city, watching lights flicker to life in the dusk. Everything looked different now. Dad appeared in my doorway. No tie, just a weathered company polo. I watched how you handled the Wexler recovery, he said quietly. You didn't just fix it. You made it better than before. Because I built that relationship over years, I replied. Trust isn't transactional, he nodded slowly. I should have seen it sooner. I didn't say, yes, you should have. He already knew. You see it now, I said instead. That's what matters. 2 months later, we secured a $7.2 million commercial development contract, the largest in company history. The client told me directly, we want to work with whoever saved Morgan & Company from collapse. Funny how things circle back. That evening, I got a text from Mom. Sunday dinner? Just us. No business talk, I promise. I smiled. Maybe we were healing. Sitting on my balcony that night, wine in hand, city glowing below, I reflected on everything. The betrayal, the silence, the walkout, the reckoning, the rise. If I learned anything, it's this. Loyalty means nothing without respect. Family means little without truth. And silence doesn't make you weak. Sometimes it makes you powerful. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop carrying weight that was never yours to bear, and wait for people to realize what they lost. Then, and only then, can you decide if they deserve to get it back.